Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel. Today we're going to begin looking at Daniel chapter 3. Now this is a very familiar passage to us in Daniel. It's the story of the fiery furnace. But this chapter begins with Nebuchadnezzar the king creating an image, an idol. Let's see how the chapter begins. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold. It was 60 cubits high, 6 cubits wide. That means it's 90 feet high, 9 feet wide. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now Nebuchadnezzar creates this huge image of gold and sets it up outside of Babylon in the plain. And then he invited all of his officials, all of the governors and advisors and prefects and administrators to come for the dedication. It says in verse 3, they assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. So he creates this image, and then he sets it up and asks them to come for the moment of dedication. And as I said, this is an idol. Well, how do we know it's an idol? Because he commands them to worship it. Notice verse 4. So at this dedication, the herald loudly proclaimed, nations, peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn and the music begins to play, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. So he calls all of his officials to the dedication of the image, and he says when the music plays, that's the signal you are to fall down and worship this image. That's how we know it's an idol. He sets it up as an object of worship. Now, of course, in ancient religions and paganism, it's not at all uncommon for pagans or other religions to worship images or idols. Now, of course, that is forbidden to the people of God. We know that. The first commandment says, you shall have no other gods before me. And the second commandment says, you shall not make an idol or an image of anything in order to worship it. So what Nebuchadnezzar has done is a violation of the first two commands to God's people. But of course, the Babylonians, it's no big deal for them. They're used to worshiping false gods, and they're used to worshiping idols. Nebuchadnezzar's created this image, calls the people and says, at the signal, the music is the signal, I want you to worship the image, the idol that I have made. Now, when we looked at chapter 2, and Daniel interpreted the dream of Nebuchadnezzar about the four kingdoms, we asked the question, had Nebuchadnezzar been converted? Because he does recognize that the God of Daniel is greater than other gods. Remember, after the dream was interpreted through Daniel, he said, your God is the God of gods. He is the King of all lords. He is the revealer of mysteries. But this does not mean that Nebuchadnezzar was converted. He recognized the power of the God of Israel, but he still is not a convert. He still worships other gods, and obviously he's still willing to engage in idolatry, as we see this creation of the image, which he intends people to worship. Now, you may wonder why ancient pagans worshipped images. Why would you worship something you had made with your own hands? It seems rather foolish to us. But in ancient religions, what would happen, they would create an image. I mean, they knew they had created it. They knew they made the image, so why would you worship it? Well, they would create the image, and then they believed whatever God they were worshiping, they believed that God's presence would inhabit the image. Now, we know from ancient texts that the god of Babylon was called Marduk. And so it may have been that Nebuchadnezzar built an image and dedicated it to Marduk, the, quote, false god of Babylon, and was commanding the people to worship the god of Babylon, whose image Nebuchadnezzar had made. Maybe that was the case, probably was, but either way, it's idolatry. Most of the Babylonians are not going to have trouble worshiping the image because they do that all the time. They're used to that kind of paganism. But there are the three friends of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They are in the assembly, and they cannot worship the image. That is a violation of who they are as the people of God. They will not worship other gods, and they will not worship the image Nebuchadnezzar has created. Now, we're going to find out that Daniel is not in this assembly. We might wonder why. It may have been that Daniel was exempted from this assembly because of his high position, or it may have been that Daniel was not there simply because he was excused. Nebuchadnezzar has such respect for the God of Daniel that he excuses Daniel from the assembly. But Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're there. We're going to see this as we read on. And suddenly they're faced with this dilemma. They cannot worship the image of gold. They cannot worship the idol that Nebuchadnezzar has created. But he's already said anyone who does not worship it will be killed immediately. He has created quite a spectacle of a fiery furnace. And I'm going to throw anybody in who refuses to worship the image that I have made. And so this sets up the conflict. What are the three friends of Daniel going to do? What are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego going to do? Will they stay true to God and refuse to worship the image and die if necessary? Or will they compromise their faith? Now in chapter 1, we've already seen they were unwilling to compromise their faith over matters of food, but their life wasn't on the line. But now their life is on the line, and we're going to see tomorrow they're going to stand true for their faith. So we'll look at how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego respond to this image of Nebuchadnezzar in tomorrow's 5-minute Bible study. So I hope you join us then for our next 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel.